What's up, ladies and gentlemen? This is Binks. I know it's been a while since I uploaded a video. I've been pretty busy the past couple months. Busy with what? It hasn't all been fun and games, and I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end of the video, but with the release of the gameplay trailer for Jedi Survivor, I might be a little bit late, but I wanted to throw my hat into the ring and try to break down everything that we saw, especially from a speedrunner's perspective, and offer a little comparison of what we saw to what we expected. This trailer didn't show us too much, and in a lot of ways it leaves us with more questions than answers, but there is some interesting stuff here to talk about. I won't be talking about the story very much, although there's a few things in the trailer that I think are worth mentioning, but there aren't any leaks here. I'm only talking about what we see in this trailer, and it's mostly focused on gameplay. But first, I wanted to say thanks to everyone who's watched my videos and subscribed recently. My Fallen Order World Record History video has really blown up in interest since this trailer came out, so I really appreciate all your comments and subs and just watching my content. So right here at the beginning, we see Cal opening a Bacta tank in some sort of facility. This place is clearly dilapidated and abandoned, judging by the things growing on the tank and on the walls. The voiceover, presumably from the inhabitant of the tank, seems to be implying that the guy in the tank was a Jedi at some point. This may or may not be the case. At this point, we really don't know anything about this person. He seems to be missing his right arm, and the left arm has marks on it that look a bit like cybernetics. As for his species, there's a number of white-skinned near-human species in Star Wars, and really this person could be from any one of them. Here we have our first look at a Magna Guard, an enemy that we knew previously was going to be in the game based on action figure reveals. We'll see more former Trade Federation enemies as the trailer continues. These Aurebesh letters that we see on the wall here are ML. No real indication what that means, but if I had to spitball, I'd guess that it's an abbreviation for maybe middle level, and this area is a 3-level complex. Upper, middle, and lower. Complete conjecture, I could be wrong, but I don't know why else they'd put ML on the wall. There's some pretty fast cuts here, but in this shot we get a look at a new combat ability where Cal lifts multiple enemies into the air. This is most likely a skill that's going to modify Cal's force telekinesis ability, that's push and pull, rather than a full new force ability. Not really sure what planet this is, but we see it a few times throughout this trailer. There's a lot of green in the background scenery, but it looks nothing like Kashyyyk, and these stone formations here on the left look somewhat inspired by the stone formations of the Giant's Causeway in Northern Ireland. We've seen this sort of art in games like Dragon Age Inquisition before. Not sure if the stone here is natural or what the significance of it is, but it looks cool, and I'm going to use it throughout this video to identify when we're back on this planet. Here, Cal's inside some sort of Imperial facility and using force push on a stormtrooper, a KX security droid, and a flame trooper. Imperial architecture is all pretty similar no matter where you are, so it's hard to guess exactly where he is. He could be in a base, he could be aboard a ship or a space station. There's really just no way to know. And now, very interestingly, we see Cal in lightsaber combat with an individual who is not the person in the Bacta tank, unless he has a prosthetic arm, and is not an Inquisitor. More interestingly, the enemy's lightsaber hilt is basically identical to Cal's. Considering Cal still has Jaro Tapal's double-bladed lightsaber, this is a little weird. Maybe it means Cal's lightsaber is going to be broken at some point in the game, and this enemy winds up with a working half of it. But then the crystal wouldn't be orange unless this person is a Jedi and changed the crystal. Maybe he loses part of his lightsaber and it's reverse engineered by another faction. I don't know. If this armored enemy is the person from the Bacta tank, he'd need to be fitted with a prosthetic right arm, and that could lend some credibility to the idea that this person is a Jedi, but these are a lot of assumptions. Here we see Cal being an excellent driver and crashing the shit out of the Mantis. I'm sure the ship's fine, but he seems to land at the entrance to this canyon settlement. If we can make assumptions about the level design based on this shot, then this level design looks a lot more open than anything in Fallen Order. I would even go so far as to say this crosses the line into almost open world territory from the look of it, which would be a completely different design philosophy and make gameplay radically different. Here we see Seer Junda, complete with a new haircut. The stone on the wall looks similar in color to the stone from the canyon in the previous scene, so this could be the same planet. I don't think we've ever seen anything like this guy on her right. I could be missing a reference here, or this could be a completely new species or faction. This shot over Cere's shoulder shows shelves of archives very similar to those in the Jedi Temple, which gives us a couple hints about where this could be. It could be Jocasta Nu's school, though I'm not sure how that would fit into this timeline. It could also be a planet called Elfrona, which is a planet in the Outer Rim, which was home to a High Republic Jedi outpost. And it was used as a treasure trove for a bunch of artifacts, and Luke Skywalker and Ben Solo discover it at some point. It could also, of course, be something completely new. But it looks like Cere's been busy trying to preserve Jedi knowledge at the very least, and is sporting a couple new tattoos on her face and maybe her arms. I'm not sure if we even saw her arms in Fallen Order, so those tattoos might have always been there. Here, another new Force combat ability on the planet with the Giant's Causeway Stones. We see Cal Force grip a heavy gunner and face him towards his allies, which this is a cool interaction with Force pull that's new to Jedi Survivor. Hopefully there's more of that. The last game let you pull enemies to you for a quick execution or to push them back into their allies, but turning them against their allies like this is a really cool idea, and I hope that they're able to do more with it in combat with other types of enemies. Here we see Cal charming some sort of bipedal creature, which seems to confirm that he's able to use beast control, which is one of the abilities that I talked about in my Fallen Order retrospective video. If you haven't seen that, there's a link at the top right of the screen. A moment later, we get a huge surprise, which is mounted combat. I didn't expect this at all, and I'm really wondering how fleshed out it's going to be. Whether it's something that we only really get to play with for 2, maybe 3 gameplay segments, or if it's something that's available to us throughout the entire game. The fact that we can ride creatures around is another point in the open world philosophy column, moving away from the Metroidvania design, perhaps. Incidentally, this shot of mounted combat is our first look at a B-1 battle droid, which I'm sure we'll be slaughtering thousands of. Here we see Cal gliding down into the canyon settlement that we saw earlier, using some sort of creature to help, in a mechanic that might work like a more restricted paraglider a la Breath of the Wild. Features like this are definitely welcome additions. One problem that Fallen Order really had was traversal being very limited. Basically, the only way that you could move around the world was to run. So between this and the use of animal mounts, hopefully the traversal aspect of gameplay is spiced up quite a bit. Here we see Cal facing down 2 enemies from what looks like a new faction that we haven't seen before. The large text on the sign above the larger enemy's head says Dendress, and the small text is a little too small and blurry for me to make out, and also partially obscured by this guy's noggin. This might be intentional, or the text might just not be important. Dendress could be the name of the establishment, or the settlement that we're in, or it could just be gibberish in Aurebesh that the devs put there. No real way to know. We get an action shot of this really cool electric spear before Cal gets down to business and ignites a second lightsaber, something that I also predicted as an evolution of our combat options. This could be a fully fledged combat style, or it could be a limited use ability. Neither one would really surprise me. We've already seen split saber strikes that basically use 2 lightsabers as a combat ability in Fallen Order after you get the split saber, so that could be all this is. Hopefully it's more fleshed out than that. It's also worth mentioning that it looks, based on the length of this offhand saber, as if the second one is actually a shoto instead of a full-length blade. We've seen this sort of weapon used in canon by Ahsoka Tano with her non-traditional reverse-gripped fighting style. This is basically the only time that we see the blades in a position where their length can be compared, so other shots where he's dual-wielding could use identical weapons to this, or the offhand might be longer than it is here. Here we're back on our planet with the Giant's Causeway Stones, where we see this building get demolished by what looks like a brown wampa. There were brown wampas in Legends, but I don't think we've seen them in canon yet, and this planet clearly isn't Hoth, which as far as I know is the only planet where wampas exist. So maybe it's something new, or maybe it's a similar looking species, maybe it's a new kind of wampa that we haven't seen before, and they're going to just say that wampas live on multiple planets. They've done that before with other Star Wars monsters like Gundarks and stuff like that, so it wouldn't really surprise me. There's a brief little clip at the end of this segment of the wampa creature picking up Cal by the leg and slamming him into the ground, which I'm sure most of us are going to die to a lot, and it's going to be a lot of fun. Back into an Imperial facility again, we get our first look at Dark Troopers, which some of you may know from The Mandalorian, and some of you may know from much older Star Wars media. During this time period, these should be Phase 1 Dark Troopers, which are just advanced combat droids. There's no human pilot inside. Those are Phase 2 Dark Troopers, which don't come around until about 9 years after Jedi Survivor takes place, I think. So there's no human pilot. That should eliminate any guilt that you feel about cutting these guys up like this, if in fact you feel any at all. Here Cal's deflecting shots from an Imperial gunship, which we've seen in the original game. And now we get our first look at Bode Akuna, who is a new character to Jedi Survivor, being played by Nosher Dalal, who you may know as Charles Smith from Red Dead Redemption 2. He also played Varco Gray from Star Wars Squadrons. He's been in a lot of other video game projects like Horizon Forbidden West, and he's been in a lot of Star Wars stuff recently. In addition to this and Varco Gray and Squadrons, he also was in Season 1 of The Bad Batch, so he's really killing it. Not really sure what the role of his character is, but this next shot of him dropkicking a scout trooper does kind of make me wonder if he's supposed to serve as some sort of combat companion. If so, that would be a completely new gameplay mechanic that wasn't in the original game. It would also bring up the question, is he the only combat companion, or are there additional characters that we haven't met yet who can fill that role? Or, the other side of that coin, are there characters that we've already met who can fill that role, like Marin? This first shot that we see of Bode takes place on a new planet with some sort of cityscape in the background. It's possible this is Nar Shaddaa or Coruscant, but it's impossible to say for sure. It really could be any large city, not even necessarily a planet-wide city. The second shot here, where he's kicking an Imperial trooper, seems to be a different planet. It's got a bunch of dead trees and mist in the background, though the rocky bluffs in the background might mean that this is the same planet with the canyon settlement that we saw earlier. It's hard to know because the shot's so dark. Cal's in combat here with some sort of large creature. The rocks behind it look similar to the Giant's Causeway rocks, which makes me think that this is the same planet that we've seen already. This straight-on look at Cal gives a good idea of how he's changed in the 5 years between Jedi Fallen Order and Jedi Survivor. And it also gives us a pretty good idea of the graphical uplift from Fallen Order to this game. Cal looks much older, and the quality of details on his face and the quality of his hair look a lot better at a glance. Here we see Cal taking down a gaggle of B-1 battle droids with a double-bladed lightsaber throw, and they're all standing outside of what seems to be some sort of rundown facility. And way in the background there, next to what looks like a small opening maybe to get inside, is a treasure chest, using the same model from the first game. So praise the Force, there are still collectibles in the world. Hopefully some ponchos return. I'm presuming that this is pretty early in the game because it's one of the few shots in this trailer where we don't see a blaster on Cal's left hip. Although it does look like there's a holster there, so maybe he had it and lost it for some reason. Now this is the unidentified person from the bacta tank, looking quite a bit different with clothes on and with dry hair, holding some sort of object that they seem to think is important. It's no doubt related to the story. In the background, we see the muscle from the scene earlier outside of what I thought was a cantina, which indicates that bacta guy is either already associated or becomes associated with this group at some point during the game. Here we're in a somewhat new environment, perhaps inside that rundown facility that Cal was outside of a minute ago. And to Cal's left is a B-2 super battle droid, somewhat analogous to an Imperial heavy gunner in how I would expect it to work mechanically during gameplay. The Aurebesh on the container behind them says POI. Not really sure what this means. I doubt it means point of interest, but it's another case of something that could be story related or it could be gibberish, and neither is more likely than the other. And speaking of heavy gunners, Cal seems to have retained his ability to parry laser blasts while sprinting, although here he's using his 2 lightsabers. Not sure if this will give you an advantage or cause problems for you in terms of your parry posture, but we'll see more about that if we get a gameplay demonstration, I'm sure. Now this clip is probably the most interesting to me because we're shown 2 brand new movement mechanics. When the Fallen Order speedrunning Discord saw this, we immediately kind of assumed that if there's any super broken movement tech that lets us break this game, it's going to be related to either this midair dash or to the grapple, or both in some way. If we figure out any way to reset our ability to use this midair dash, it would basically let us fly just like we can in Fallen Order, since it doesn't look like Cal loses any height while the animation is playing. We might not be able to go up and down, but moving horizontally across large gaps is very frequently way faster than any other way to traverse areas. Beyond what we see from this clip in terms of a gameplay mechanic, the environment looks something like a crashed or scrapped ship, similar in its aesthetic to the Venator on Zepho and Fallen Order. Some of us were also thinking that this could actually be Braca, and that Survivor will show Cal making at least one return trip to the Scrapper's planet from the tutorial of the original game. That's kind of my hope. Braca's a really cool planet in concept, and there's a lot of interesting things to be done with a planet like that in terms of level design and art. So hopefully that's what this is. As Cal grabs a hold of this bar that he grapples to, on the left side of the screen we can see a lot of separatist armaments, like an MTT troop transport, vulture droids, the droid starships, and a bunch of AAT tanks. It's possible that this could still be Bracca. We saw a Trade Federation Lucrehulk ship being brought in for scrap there at the beginning of the first game. At the bottom of this grate here, there's an insignia that looks like a red triangle. I don't recognize this. It could be original to the game, or it could be something that's been seen before in the universe. It's not an insignia that's known to be used by the Scrappers Guild as far as I know, but if anyone recognizes this, let me know in the comments below. Here we see another new movement mechanic using a lightsaber to slide down vertical walls. Not sure how they'll handle retraversing these walls to get back up, or if that's even going to be possible, but visually this looks a lot cooler than just jumping down from one ledge to another. And of course, as he slides down, we see firing on Cal, several B1 battle droids, and a B2 super. And now here's another really interesting segment. Cal ignites his normal lightsaber with a modification that gives it a crossguard, not unlike what we've seen in the sequel trilogy from Kylo Ren's lightsaber, although this is a little different. In the next clip, we can see him using this lightsaber against several commando droids, and we see a few interesting differences between this and his normal fighting style. His normal R1 combo animations have changed somewhat from what we've seen in Fallen Order and from what we've seen elsewhere in this trailer, to a completely different set of animations that's significantly heavier, takes longer to wind up, and presumably as a trade-off will hit harder. The blade of the lightsaber in this style also appears a bit longer than normal. I'm not sure at this point if this will give you a reach advantage on some enemies, or if the crossguard on the lightsaber might give you some sort of defensive bonus. So after 2 hits with this heavy saber style, we see this reddish icon appear over the commando droid, and it disappears again when Cal initiates an execution. This is basically something similar to what we've seen before in games like Sekiro, where a staggered or unaware enemy is vulnerable to an execution, and in Sekiro this was indicated by a red dot. Fallen Order also had these executions, but they didn't have the red indicator, so occasionally you would miss one because you weren't aware that the enemy was staggered. And there ends the trailer with a release date reveal of March 17th, 2023, St. Paddy's Day, in honor of the Ginger Jedi himself. So what are my biggest takeaways from this trailer? First, I think that Respawn might be taking a much less strict approach to a Metroidvania-style game than they did with Fallen Order, and are experimenting much more with open areas. I see this in the canyon area for the most part, but there are sure to be other areas that they're not showing us yet. We've only really seen 2 planets, maybe 3 at the most. Some of these levels look like pretty traditional straight-line sections that might loop back on themselves here and there, but some are completely open. There were some open areas in Fallen Order, but these look a lot denser and more interesting to explore than an area like, say, the crash site on Zepho. Like, just looking at this shot of this canyon settlement, there's all kinds of verticality in this space that wasn't present in a space like the crash site on Zepho that I think is going to make this sort of area much more interesting to explore. Second, I'm seeing hints in the footage of at least 4 distinct animation sets and combat styles for Cal. His normal single blade, there's dual wielding with his single blade and a Shoto, there's him using his double-bladed lightsaber, and then his single-bladed lightsaber with a crossguard. Each of these styles has a completely different R1 combo animation, timing, and presumably damage values. I'm left to kind of assume that the player will be free to swap between these styles at will. There's really no reason to restrict you from doing so. The dual sabers can come together to make the double blade. We've seen that with weapons like the lightsabers that Asajj Ventress uses in the Clone Wars. They can be wielded independently or locked together in a dual blade. The double blade can be wielded using just the single blade, and the crossguards can come down off the single blade whenever you like. Third, I find it maybe more interesting that they didn't show us the blaster at all in gameplay. So at this point, we're still not really sure if Cal's blaster functions more as a narrative device, as a ranged cooldown of some sort, integrated with a stealth mechanic, or if it's available in gameplay at all times. If it is a cooldown, we have no idea what sort of skills it might be tied to. If it's available at all times, we don't really know how it'll accompany and synergize with the 4 combat styles that we've seen in this trailer using just lightsabers. These are questions that I think we're really going to need a full gameplay demo in order to answer, and I'm not really sure if we're going to get one this time around. The response to the gameplay demonstration for Fallen Order prior to its release was pretty negative, so this time I think Respawn might actually just decide to let hype trailers like this do all of the work. Pretty much everyone's already made their minds up on Jedi Survivor anyways. If you liked Fallen Order, you're probably buying this. And if you didn't like Fallen Order, you're probably not buying this unless you see something in a hype trailer that piques your interest. Or maybe you're the sort of person that waits for reviews, but if you are that sort of person, gameplay demos aren't really going to be effective on you anyways. So that's more or less what I take away from this trailer. Very little in the way of story details, a lot of flashy animations, and a few cool feature reveals, but I'm still left with a lot of questions about how some of these systems are going to work and come together. I have a lot of story questions that I'm sure I won't really get answers to until the game comes out in just under 3 months. And despite the fact that I don't think Respawn is going to give us a gameplay demonstration, I'd really like to see one. I think it would answer a lot of my questions. So when Jedi Survivor does release on March 17th, I'll be streaming my gameplay and potentially speedruns and challenge runs on my Twitch channel, the link to which is in the description below. That being said, as I mentioned earlier in the video, my life's been changing pretty significantly over the past few months. I'm currently in the process of selling my house so that I can quit my job and go back to school full-time. So the next 6 months are going to be pretty unpredictable. But I'm going to keep trying to make videos whenever I can on Jedi Survivor, and I've got a few other long videos that I've had in my head for a long time that if you're a fan of Star Wars video games, I think you might really enjoy. So thank you very much for watching. Please like this video if you enjoyed it, dislike it if you didn't, and consider subscribing for more Star Wars content. Goodbye, my friends, and may the Force be with you.